At just 12 years old, she was taken from this world. But she refused to stay dead. Now, the ones who ended her life will face a horror they never imagined. Dark clouds loomed over the small African village of Nsumba, where the winds carried whispers of a terrifying legend. They said the spirits of the unjustly slain never found peace. They said they returned. And tonight, the whispers were about to turn into reality. 12-year-old Makena had been gone for exactly 1 year. The villagers spoke of her in hushed tones, afraid to even utter her name after what had happened. No one wanted to remember the tragic night when she was snatched away from her home, her innocent screams swallowed by the night. But someone remembered, someone who couldn't rest. Her killers thought it was over. They thought they had buried their sins deep beneath the earth. But the dead don't forget, and neither does vengeance. That night, a wind colder than death itself swept through the village. The ground trembled as if something beneath it was waking up. The air grew thick, heavy, charged with an energy no one could explain. And then, the first scream shattered the silence. She was back, and this time, she wasn't alone. The night was thick with silence, but inside the hut of Mama Sifu, fear whispered in the corners. She sat on her mat, trembling, gripping the wooden beads around her wrist. Something was wrong. Sudden gust of wind burst through her window, snuffing out the candle beside her. The darkness felt alive. Mama Sifu's breath caught in her throat as she heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping against the door. It was gentle, almost childlike. But no child should be out at this hour. Who is there?" she whispered. Silence. Then, tap, tap, tap. She stumbled back, knocking over a clay pot, her hands fumbling for anything to use as a weapon. The air in the hut grew unbearably cold. The tapping stopped. The silence stretched, suffocating her. Then, a voice, soft, broken, and unmistakably familiar. "Mama." Mama Sifu froze. Her body shook violently. She knew that voice. It was the voice of Makena, her daughter, the daughter who had been dead for a year. Tears blurred Mama Sifu's vision. "Makena!" she choked out. The door creaked open slightly, revealing nothing but the cold night air. And then, just beyond the threshold, she saw them. 2 small footprints in the dirt, leading away. But they weren't normal footprints. They glowed faintly, pulsating with an otherworldly light. Mama Sifu clutched her chest as realization dawned upon her. Makena was back, and she wasn't alone. Deep in the heart of Nsumba, the night grew even darker. The air was thick with something unseen, something unnatural. Fear seeped into every hut, every shadow. A hunter, Babu, walked through the silent village with a torch in his trembling hand. He had seen things no man should see. Suddenly, a whisper. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the trees. It was Makena's voice. "Why did you let them do this to me?" Babu's grip on the torch faltered. He turned, his heartbeat thundering in his chest. And then, he ran. His feet pounded against the dirt, his breath ragged. But the whispers followed. "They're all guilty, and they must pay." Babu fell to his knees, sobbing. "Please, it wasn't me. I had no choice." The wind howled. The torches flickered. The village had awoken something that would not sleep again. Makena's revenge had begun. As Makena's vengeful spirit roamed the village, the once peaceful streets of Nsumba transformed into corridors of dread. The wind carried her sorrow, and her eyes burned with a fierce determination that defied death itself. Each silent step resonated through the deserted alleys, a relentless reminder that injustice would never fade without consequence. In the early hours, the village elder, Okoro, gathered with a few brave souls in the central square. His voice, heavy with both fear and resolve, echoed as he recounted the eerie events that had plagued Nsumba. He spoke of strange sounds piercing the night, inexplicable shadows lurking in every corner, and eyes that glowed like dying embers amid darkness. "Ants!" Okoro's words sent shudders through the crowd, and whispered prayers filled the chilly air. Even as they prayed for deliverance, the sense of impending doom tightened its grip on their hearts. The once vibrant market, now completely deserted, lay abandoned in silence. Scattered baskets, broken pottery, and the faint odor of stale cooking. Fires bore witness to a life abruptly halted by terror. As the new day broke, a cold mist crept in from the distant hills, as if the very earth was mourning. The villagers, huddled in fearful clusters, could not escape the palpable presence of Makena's spirit. With every gust of wind came faint whispers of her name that chilled their bones, blending sorrow with dread. Meanwhile, in a forgotten corner of Nsumba, a young and defiant warrior named Temba resolved that enough was enough. Armed with nothing but a carved spear and unyielding determination, he stepped away from the safety of his home to confront the unseen force. His heart pounded as he approached the sacred grove, where ancient legends spoke of spirits that guarded the land. Deep within the grove, the air grew heavy and unnervingly still. The rustle of leaves and soft murmur of ancestral chants filled Temba's ears. Suddenly, a piercing cry shattered the silence, and he froze, knowing with certainty that Makena's spirit was near. In that moment, Temba realized that Makena's wrath was not merely a haunting, it was the awakening of a relentless force destined to purge the corruption that had long haunted Nsumba. The fate of the village now teetered on the edge, with every step Temba took, holding the power to alter its destiny forever. In the heart of the sacred grove, time twisted and warped as Makena's restless spirit surged forth. The air grew frigid, and the ancient trees whispered secrets of sorrow long buried. Temba's pulse thundered in his ears as he stepped deeper into the clearing, each cautious footfall weighted by the fate of his village. He knew that confronting Makena meant facing not only a vengeful ghost, but also the dark truths of his own past. A haunting melody broke the silence, a mournful tune that seemed to rise from the very soul of the land. The ethereal notes danced around Temba, intermingling with the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. It was as if the grove, driven by duty and terror, Temba advanced further into the clearing. There, suspended between reality and nightmare, Makena's spectral form hovered. Her once tender face was now transformed, a mask of sorrow and wrath bearing the scars of betrayal and unresolved agony. In that moment, the spirit seemed to embody the collective pain of a village long haunted by injustice. Itself was weeping for the lost innocence of Nsumba and for the unhealed wounds of its people. With a quivering voice, Temba finally broke the silence. "Makena, why do you torment us? What must be done for your soul to find peace?" His words faltered as the grove trembled around him. A spectral wind picked up, carrying with it a reply that resonated like the breaking of brittle branches, a sound laden with grief and retribution that charged moment. Temba felt the full weight of his heritage. The corruption and sins of the village, the guilt he had long concealed, converged with the mournful presence of Makena. Her ghostly eyes seemed to plead, "Make amends, or suffer as we have suffered." The realization struck him hard. Makena's vengeance was a call for justice, a mirror reflecting the pain of Nsumba. As the darkness of the grove deepened, Temba's carved spear trembled in his grasp, its once hopeful promise now a symbol of inevitable sacrifice. The ancient trees stood silent, bearing witness to the shifting balance of fate. The air was thick with foreboding, every rustle and creak a reminder that the path to redemption would be paved with storyelling. In that fateful moment, the scales of destiny tipped irreversibly. Makena's call for justice echoed like a curse, across Nsumba, marking the beginning of a reckoning that would change the village forever. At dawn, even though the cursed village of Nsumba seemed to awaken, the lingering terror refused to fade. The horizon was painted with a dim, ghostly light, while the heavy mist that had blanketed the night still clung to the ground. An eerie silence settled over the village as every soul trembled at the memories of Makena's wrath. The air was thick with foreboding, and whispers of the past echoed through the narrow alleys, as if the very wind carried the voices of the wronged. In the village center, Temba, still haunted by the recent encounters, stood before the council of elders. His heart was heavy with guilt and determination, a burden born from a legacy of secrets and suppressed remorse. The elders, faces lined with wisdom and sorrow, exchanged anxious glances. They understood that Makena's curse was not merely a haunting, but a call for justice, demanding that the sins of the past be acknowledged and atoned for with sacrifice and courage. Throughout the day, subtle horrors seeped into every corner of Nsumba. Unseen forces whispered in the alleys, and fleeting apparitions danced at the periphery of vision. The marketplace, once vibrant and full of life, now lay abandoned with broken stalls and scattered debris, silent witnesses to the sudden onset of panic. Mothers clutched their children tightly, and even the bravest of souls avoided the dark recesses of their homes. The vibrant spirit of the village had been replaced by a palpable sense of dread, as if the land itself mourned its lost innocence. At the heart of Nsumba, an ancient shrine stood as a forgotten relic of bygone days. Once a place of solace and prayer, its worn carvings and flickering candles now resonated with an uncanny presence. As Makena's anger intensified, the shrine transformed into a gateway for restless ancestral spirits, demanding that the living confront the sins of their forefathers. The shrine's haunting aura served as a grim reminder of the price of injustice. In the fading light of the afternoon, Makena's spectral visage emerged along a desolate path. Her eyes burned with a mix of sorrow and seething vengeance, a sight that sent shivers down the spines of any who dared to look. As villagers scattered in terror, her ghostly presence signaled the beginning of a reckoning, a promise that the long-suppressed guilt and injustice would no longer be hidden in the shadows. Thus, the day unfolded as a grim testament to fear, guilt, and the relentless pursuit of redemption. In every shadow and whispered prayer, Makena's spirit reminded the people of Nsumba that justice demands its due. The village now teetered on the brink of a transformation that would force them to confront not only a vengeful ghost, but the very depths of their own humanity. As dusk settled once more over Nsumba, a sense of finality clung to the village like an inescapable curse. The recent horrors had scarred every heart, and Makena's vengeful spirit now pulsed with an even greater intensity. It was clear that the time for mere whispers was over. This was the hour for reckoning. Determined to break the cycle of terror, Temba rallied a small band of brave villagers. Their eyes, filled with resolve and despair, reflected the weight of their collective past. They set out toward the ancient shrine, a relic of forgotten days and unatoned sins. Each step they took echoed with the memories of those lost and the promise of imminent justice. The rhythmic beating of their hearts melded with the distant, mournful cries of Makena's spirit, as if the very air was pleading for redemption. The journey grew perilous as they approached the shrine. The landscape transformed into a barren expanse, and an unnatural chill permeated the air. The ancient stones of the shrine, weathered by time and steeped in legend, emanated a cold, forbidding presence. Every step forward seemed to summon long-forgotten voices and echo with unresolved grief. A haunting whisper carried on the wind urged them to remember the sins of the past and to face the inevitable consequences. Inside the shrine, darkness reigned supreme, pierced only by the flickering light of a solitary torch held by Temba. Shadows danced erratically along the walls, bearing silent testimony to restless souls bound by ancient curses. The oppressive atmosphere was almost tangible, as every whisper of wind morphed into a lament from times long gone. Temba's heart pounded, not merely with fear, but with the fierce determination to end the torment that had plagued his people for too long. Then, amidst the oppressive silence, a soft, sorrowful murmur emerged from the depths of the shrine. "Forgive us." It was Makena's voice, a mournful plea that mingled with the ancient echoes of regret and retribution. Her spectral presence, partially illuminated in the dim light, appeared as both a harbinger of doom and a symbol of unavenged injustice. In that heart-stopping moment, Temba realized that redemption would not come from erasing the past, but from confronting it head-on. The shrine, the village, and the restless spirit of Makena were irrevocably intertwined in a tapestry of grief and hope. With unwavering resolve, he stepped forward, ready to challenge the darkness that had haunted Nsumba. For far too long, deep within the eerie silence of the shrine, Temba's every step resonated like a drumbeat of impending fate. The chamber, dimly lit by the ghostly glow of ancient carvings, exuded a palpable aura of sorrow and retribution. Here the weight of centuries bore down on him as he ventured further into a realm where past and present blurred into a single tapestry of pain and hope. The air was thick with the lingering scent of burnt incense and damp earth, a reminder of long-forgotten rituals. Shadows danced along the worn stone floor, twisting into uncanny forms, as if the very essence of the ancestors sought to speak through the darkness. A steady, rhythmic pulse, like the heartbeat of the earth, vibrated through the room, filling Temba with both dread and a strange, compelling purpose. Drawn by an inexplicable force, Temba approached a weathered altar at the center of the chamber. The altar, scarred by time, bore cryptic carvings and faded symbols that told stories of sacrifice and redemption. Resting upon it was a small, intricately carved box, a relic rumored to hold the power to either bind or release the restless spirits of Nsumba. With a deep, steadying breath, Temba knelt before the altar. His heart pounded in time with the ancient pulse of the shrine as he extended a trembling hand toward the box. In that fateful moment, a surge of cold energy shot through him, a visceral reminder that the past was not merely memory, but a living force demanding reckoning. Images of bygone eras flashed before his eyes, visions of injustice, echoes of forgotten cries, and the lingering agony of a village betrayed by its own silence. The box, now within his grasp, seemed to pulse with a heartbeat of its own, as if inviting him to unlock the long-concealed truths of Nsumba. In that charged moment, Temba realized that his decision would ripple through the fabric of time, determining whether the village would find salvation or be forever condemned by its sins. In that instant, the boundaries between life and death, past and future, dissolved into a singular, overwhelming truth. The spirits of Nsumba, led by Makena's sorrowful, yet vengeful cry, awaited his choice. As the ancient chamber filled with an otherworldly light, Temba prepared to confront the ultimate legacy of his people, knowing that the path he chose would either shatter the curse or bind them to an eternal cycle of torment. In the cold, heavy silence of the shrine, Temba stood trembling before the ancient altar, the carved box still pulsing in his grasp. The spectral light danced along the stone walls, as if urging him to make a choice that would either free the restless souls or condemn them further. The air grew denser, charged with ancestral voices that whispered in a language older than time itself. Each murmur carried the weight of generations, pleading with Temba to atone for the sins of the past. His heart pounded like a war drum, echoing the pain of a village that had suffered for far too long. As Temba hesitated, the voices grew louder, forming a chorus of grief and demand. A spectral figure emerged before him, a luminous apparition of an elder ancestor whose eyes shone with both sorrow and stern resolve. The apparition's outstretched hand seemed to beckon him forward, urging him to open the box and confront the truth hidden within its aged wood. Temba's mind raced with memories of old legends and forbidden secrets, and he knew that the fate of Nsumba rested on this moment. The ancestral spirit spoke in a voice like rustling leaves. "Break thee, cycle, or let our anguish bind you forever." His words resonated deep within Temba's soul, igniting a spark of courage amidst the swirling dread. Gathering every ounce of resolve, Temba slowly opened the carved box. A burst of cold, radiant energy surged forth, enveloping him in a spectral embrace. The air shimmered with visions of the past, scenes of injustice, forgotten rituals, and the relentless cries of those who had been wronged. Each vision flashed before his eyes, a reminder of the deep scars etched into the heart of his people. The power within the box was overwhelming, and for a moment, time itself seemed to pause as the ghosts of Nsumba converged upon him, their silent pleas merging into a single, unbearable truth. In that transformative moment, Temba realized that the choice before him was not simply one of power, but of sacrifice and redemption. The glowing energy from the box spread outwards, reaching every corner of the shrine and spilling into the dark corridors of the village. It was as if the spirits themselves had been awakened to demand justice, a cleansing fire to burn away the legacy of cruelty. Temba's hands shook, but he clenched the box tightly, accepting the burden of the past and the hope for a new beginning. The ancestral voices merged with Makena's sorrowful wail, a haunting reminder that only through truth and penance could the cycle of vengeance be broken. Thus, in the flickering light of ancient power, Temba stepped forward into destiny, prepared to lead his people out of darkness and into a future where the ghosts of yesterday could finally rest. As the spectral energy from the ancient box gradually receded, the once haunted shrine began to reveal its hidden truth. The divine glow faded into an eerie twilight, and the spirits that had hovered in sorrow and rage now drifted toward a long-awaited closure. In the quiet aftermath of that cleansing surge, Temba felt an unfamiliar calm settle over his trembling soul, yet the air still carried the promise of a final trial, a last test to break the cycle of guilt and vengeance that had gripped Nsumba for generations. Determined to ensure Makena's restless spirit could finally find peace, Temba embarked on a journey beyond the confines of the shrine. Clutching the sacred box, which now pulsed gently as if in quiet satisfaction, he set out toward the legendary sacred spring hidden deep in the nearby highlands. A mystical oasis whispered about for its cleansing power. If Temba could reach that spring, perhaps the curse that bound Makena's soul would finally be broken. With every step, memories of Nsumba's tormented past echoed in Temba's mind. The silent cries, the anguished whispers of ancestors, and the relentless pursuit of redemption that had driven him this far. The journey was arduous, and the terrain unforgiving, yet the fervent hope of liberating his village from eternal torment propelled him forward. Along the way, he discovered relics of bygone eras, a broken spear embedded in ancient soil, crumbling, murals depicting the village's sorrowful history, and long-forgotten symbols etched on weathered stones. As dawn approached, the air grew crisp, and the scent of fresh earth filled the valley. At last, Temba reached the sacred spring, an oasis shimmering with crystal-clear water and encircled by vibrant flora. The spring emanated a serene, almost divine light, promising a chance to cleanse the heavy burdens of the past. Kneeling by the water's edge, Temba cradled the sacred box and whispered a solemn prayer to the ancestors. In that sacred moment, Temba gently placed the carved box into the spring. The water began to ripple and glow, as if embracing the ancient relic and its legacy. Slowly, the spectral remnants of Makena's anguish swirled around him before dissolving into the clear water. A profound silence fell upon the land, a silence that spoke of release, closure, and the promise of renewal. In that final act of surrender, the tormented past of Nsumba began to fade, replaced by a hopeful promise of rebirth. Temba's journey did not end in tragedy but in a bittersweet victory, a moment when the restless spirits, led by Makena's enduring cry, could finally find eternal peace. In the aftermath of the sacred spring's cleansing, a tentative calm began to envelop Nsumba. The heavy mist that had once shrouded the village in dread started to lift, unveiling the scars of a past marred by sorrow and injustice. The vengeful spirits, which had tormented the hearts of its people, seemed to have retreated into an uneasy silence. Yet, even as nature awakened, the echoes of Makena's suffering persisted like fading whispers on the wind, a reminder that healing required both remembrance and forgiveness. Temba, still holding the now dim sacred box, stood at the edge of the village. His eyes, marked by both exhaustion and resolve, swept over the awakening community. The crisp morning air mingled with the scent of fresh earth and budding flora, as if nature itself was extending a promise of rebirth. Yet within Temba's heart, the weight of his ordeal lingered, a solemn reminder of the sacrifices demanded by redemption. In the days that followed, the villagers emerged hesitantly from their homes. Their eyes, once filled with fear, now shone with a fragile optimism. Families reconvened in the central square, exchanging hushed words of hope and plans for renewal. The once abandoned market began to stir with life again, as fresh produce and vibrant textiles returned to the stalls. Still, amid this revival, there was an unspoken understanding that the past could not be entirely erased. It would remain a part of Nsumba's collective memory. One serene evening, as the sun dipped low, Mama Sefu stood by the sacred spring. Her eyes, once wide with terror, now shimmered with a bittersweet blend of grief and hope. The cleansing waters had not only washed away a cursed legacy, but had also rekindled the fading embers of a long-forgotten promise. In the gentle ripple of the spring, she could almost hear Makena's voice, no longer a call for vengeance, but a soft murmur of forgiveness. As time flowed onward, Nsumba slowly began to heal. The tragic echoes of Makena's fate merged with the indomitable spirit of its people, weaving a tapestry of remembrance, resilience, and redemption. Temba, now a reluctant keeper of the village's painful secrets, vowed to honor both the wounds of the past and the promise of a new beginning. In every corner of Nsumba, the legacy of injustice was gradually replaced by the enduring hope that even the deepest sorrow could pave the way to a brighter tomorrow. In that serene twilight, as the village embraced the promise of tomorrow, the lingering specter of Makena faded into legend, a timeless reminder that justice, born of sorrow, can ultimately lead to redemption. The final chapter of Makena's story began as the first rays of dawn kissed the village of Nsumba. The relentless night, filled with sorrow and terror, had slowly given way to the promise of renewal. Though the scars of the past were still visible, on every weathered face and cracked stone, a fragile hope was beginning to bloom in the hearts of the villagers. Temba, having borne the weight of his people's dark history, now stood at the edge of the village. His eyes, reflecting the soft glow of the rising sun, held both sorrow and a resolute determination. He knew that the healing of Nsumba would not be instantaneous. The memories of Makena's tragic fate and the deep-rooted injustice would take time to mend. Yet, in that quiet morning light, there was a promise that every wound could eventually transform into a testament of strength. Throughout the day, the village slowly stirred back to life. The elders, once haunted by guilt and fear, gathered in the central square and spoke in hushed tones of forgiveness and new beginnings. The vibrant market, which had long lain silent under the pall of dread, began to echo with the sounds of cautious laughter and renewed determination. In every whispered conversation and every tentative smile, the spirit of the people was reawakening. In a quiet corner near the sacred spring, Mama Seifu, her eyes moist with both grief and hope, placed a carved, wooden marker inscribed with Makena's name. This humble monument stood as a symbol of remembrance and a promise that the lessons of the past would guide a brighter future. The marker, embraced by wildflowers and resilient shrubs, was a beacon of the community's commitment to honor their lost child while moving forward together. As the day unfolded, the echoes of Makena's vengeful cries softened into distant memories. Her spirit, once a harbinger of doom, had transformed into a symbol of the power of redemption. The curse that had plagued Nsumba for so long began to lift, replaced by a cautious yet determined resolve to forge a future free from the chains of the past. In that poignant moment, Temba and his people understood that true healing comes from embracing one's history, however painful it may be, and transforming sorrow into strength. Makena's tale would forever be etched in the annals of Nsumba, a timeless reminder that even in the darkest of nights, the dawn of redemption is always just a heartbeat away.